He brought his pregnant mistress, but why is he terrified of that envelope? What's inside?
He opened the envelope and his hand started shaking so badly the paper rattled against the table. "What did you do?" he whispered. It was our 10-year anniversary dinner surrounded by friends when my husband Marcus brought his mistress and introduced her as his future. She smiled, resting her hand on her stomach like she belonged there, like I didn't. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. He humiliated me in front of everyone, no warning, no conversation, just replaced me in a single sentence. I didn't argue, I didn't cry. I just slid that envelope toward him. Then the waiter stopped mid-step because Marcus went pale. And when he looked up at me, his voice dropped to something I'd never heard before. "Who else knows about this?" I held his gaze for a second longer than he could handle, then leaned back in my chair like nothing had happened. Around us, the restaurant hadn't recovered, glasses hovered mid-air. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the soft piano in the background suddenly felt too loud, too exposed. "Answer me, Elena," Marcus said, louder this time, but there was no authority left in it, just panic. I glanced at Lila. Up close, she looked younger than I expected. Confident a moment ago, now her smile had stiffened, her fingers slowly slipping away from his hand like she wasn't sure she should still be touching him. "Marcus," she murmured, barely above a whisper, "what is she talking about?" He didn't answer her. That was the first crack. Because Marcus always had an answer. For everything. Clients, investors, me, especially me. I folded my hands neatly on the table, right beside the empty envelope. "Go on," I said quietly. "You made an announcement. It's only fair you explain the rest." His jaw tightened. I could see the calculation in his eyes, the same look he used in meetings when something went off script, except this time, he wasn't recovering. Across the table, one of our friends shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should—" "No," Marcus cut in sharply, not looking at them. His eyes stayed locked on me. "This isn't what it looks like." I almost smiled at that. Almost. Because for the past year, that had been his line. Every late night, every missed call, every time I felt something was off, "This isn't what it looks like." But now, for the first time, he looked like he didn't believe it himself. I tilted my head slightly. "Then explain it," I said. His fingers tightened around the paper again. He didn't read it out loud. He didn't even look back down. Instead, he leaned forward, lowering his voice just enough so only I could hear. "You went through my accounts?" I didn't answer. And that's when his expression shifted from panic to something colder. Because in that moment, he realized this wasn't a reaction. It was a setup. And I wasn't finished. Marcus didn't look down at the paper again. Instead, he stared at me like he was trying to rewind the last few minutes and find where he lost control. "You had no right," he said under his breath, each word tight, measured. I let out a quiet breath, almost amused. "No right?" I repeated. "To our accounts?" That word "our" landed heavier than anything else I could have said. A week ago, I wouldn't have said it like that. A week ago, I was still asking questions, still giving him space to explain, still hoping there was something I was missing. But that version of me ended the night I saw the message. It had been past midnight. Marcus was in the shower, his laptop open on the kitchen counter, something he never used to leave unattended. A notification lit up the screen. "Can't wait to see you again, Elle." Just one line. No context, no explanation. But it wasn't the message that stayed with me. It was how fast he moved when he came out, water still dripping from his hair, and slammed the laptop shut the second he saw where I was standing. Too fast. Too defensive. "Work," he said immediately. "Client stuff." I remember nodding. I remember pretending to believe him. But that was the moment something shifted. Because Marcus never explained things that quickly unless he was covering something. So I stopped asking. Instead, I started looking. At first, it was small. I logged into our business accounts, something I hadn't done in months because he insisted on streamlining responsibilities. I told myself I was just double-checking numbers. Then I saw the transfers. Not large enough to trigger alerts. Not obvious enough to raise suspicion. But consistent. Recurring. And labeled vaguely consulting expenses, external partnerships, things that sounded legitimate if you didn't look twice. I looked more than twice. And the deeper I went, the less it made sense. Because the money wasn't just moving, it was disappearing. Back at the table, I watched Marcus try to steady his breathing. He straightened slightly, forcing his shoulders back, like he could still salvage this. "This is a misunderstanding," he said, louder now, glancing around at the table. "She doesn't know what she's talking about." I reached forward and tapped the edge of the envelope. "Then read it," I said. He didn't move. And that's when I knew he already understood exactly how much I knew. "Then read it," I said again, this time just loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. Marcus didn't touch the paper. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. I could feel every pair of eyes shifting between us, waiting, trying to understand what they'd just walked into. Lila leaned closer to him, her voice tight now. "Marcus, just tell me what this is." He swallowed but still didn't look at her. "It's nothing," he said quickly, "just paperwork she's misinterpreting." I let out a small, controlled exhale. Then I leaned forward and gently turned the top page so it faced the table. "Joint asset transfer authorization." I read aloud. "That did it?" A murmur rippled across the table. Someone shifted their chair. Another person set their glass down a little too hard. Lila's hand dropped fully from his arm. "Asset? Transfer?" she repeated, her confidence cracking. Marcus's jaw tightened. "It's standard," he snapped. "Business structuring. You wouldn't understand." I tilted my head slightly. "You're right," I said calmly. "So maybe you should explain why those standard transfers are going into an account that isn't listed anywhere in our company records." That word hit harder than I expected. Isn't, not wasn't, not a mistake. Deliberate. Marcus's composure slipped just for a second. His eyes flicked to the envelope, then back to me. "You've been digging," he said quietly. "I've been paying attention," I corrected. He let out a sharp breath, forcing a laugh that didn't land. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "Am I?" I reached into the envelope again, but this time, I didn't pull everything out. I let a second document slide halfway into view. Just enough. Marcus saw it, and whatever he was about to say died instantly. His entire posture changed, shoulders stiff, eyes locked on that single sheet like it might disappear if he stared hard enough. Across the table, Lila noticed. "What is that?" she asked, her voice no longer soft, now edged with something closer to fear. Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't. I tapped the corner of the partially revealed document with one finger. "You seemed very confident a minute ago," I said. "Go ahead, tell her where the money went." "Stop," he said immediately, low and sharp. "Not to me. To the situation. To the unraveling." I didn't move my hand. "You brought her here," I said evenly. "You made this public." Lila slowly leaned back in her chair, putting a small but noticeable distance between them. "Marcus," she said again, quieter now. "What is she talking about?" He finally looked at her. And for the first time since he walked in, he didn't have control of the story anymore. His lips parted slightly like he might try to explain. But before he could, his eyes flicked back to that second document, and his face drained completely. "You weren't supposed to find that," he whispered. The table went completely still. Not the kind of silence you can ignore, the kind that presses in, heavy, suffocating, like everyone suddenly realized they were watching something they weren't supposed to see. I slid the second document the rest of the way out. Marcus didn't try to stop me this time. He just watched. It was a property deed. Lila's name was on it. A small apartment across the city, nothing flashy, but expensive enough to matter, paid in full. A few people at the table leaned forward trying to read it. Someone whispered, "Wait, what is that?" I didn't rush. I let the moment sit. Then I spoke. "Those consulting expenses?" I said, glancing briefly at Marcus before looking back at the table. "They've been funding this." Lila blinked, confused. "Funding? What?" I tapped the document lightly. "Your apartment." Her head snapped toward Marcus. "You said you bought that." "I did," he cut in quickly, too quickly. "It's mine. It has nothing to do with our company?" I finished for him. He stood up so abruptly, his chair scraped loudly against the floor, turning even more heads in our direction. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said, his voice tight, barely contained. I stayed seated, calm, still, because this was the part he hadn't planned for. "I understand enough," I replied. "You've been moving money out slowly, small amounts, just enough not to raise flags." His eyes darted around the table at our friends, at Lila, at the documents like he was searching for a way out that didn't exist. You're making assumptions, he said, but there was no weight behind it anymore. I leaned back slightly, studying him. Am I? Lila pushed her chair back a few inches, her expression shifting from confusion to something sharper. Marcus, is that true? She asked. He didn't answer her. Again, that silence said more than anything else could have. I picked up the deed and held it just high enough for her to see clearly. You didn't just lie to me, I said, my voice steady. You built a replacement life. Lila's face went pale. Replace, she echoed faintly. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, pacing once beside the table before stopping. This isn't how this was supposed to happen, he muttered. That was the first honest thing he'd said all night. I reached back into the envelope one last time. There was one document left. I placed it face down on the table and slid it slowly toward him. Then let's do it the way it's supposed to, I said. He didn't touch it. Didn't even breathe, it seemed. Go ahead, I added quietly. Tell them why this one matters. He stared at it like it might destroy him just by turning it over. And, judging by the way, his hands started shaking again. It would. Marcus didn't move. For a few seconds, he just stood there, staring down at the final document, like it wasn't real, like if he refused to touch it, none of this would exist. Marcus, I said quietly, you already know what it says. That was the problem. He did. His hand twitched slightly, then finally, slowly, he reached down and flipped it over. The logo at the top was unmistakable. A formal notice. Financial Crimes Division. He sucked in a sharp breath like the air had been knocked out of him. No, he muttered, barely audible. No, you didn't. I did, I said. The words didn't need force. They landed anyway. Lila leaned forward, trying to read it, her voice trembling now. What is that? I didn't look at her. My eyes stayed on Marcus. An investigation notice, I said, filed 3 days ago. That's when the room shifted again. Not curiosity this time. Understanding. Marcus shook his head, stepping back like distance could undo it. You went to the authorities, he said, his voice cracking under the weight of it. I brought evidence, I corrected. And there it was. The full picture, laid out in a single moment. The transfers, the hidden account, the apartment in her name, the slow, deliberate plan to move money out of our company, and build something separate, something hidden. A life that didn't include me. Lila's chair scraped softly as she pushed herself back. You told me it was investments, she said, her voice hollow. You said everything was clean. Marcus turned toward her, desperate now. This is being twisted, I can fix this. But even he didn't sound convinced. Because he'd seen the document. He knew it wasn't a warning. It was already in motion. I didn't know, Lila said, almost to herself, shaking her head. Then louder, sharper. I didn't sign up for this. She stepped away from the table completely. Didn't look back. That was the second crack. The first had been me. Now it was everything else. Around us, the whispers weren't subtle anymore. People weren't pretending not to watch. The illusion Marcus had built control, confidence, image was gone, right there in front of everyone. He looked at me one last time, searching for something, an out, a reversal, anything. There's still time to stop this, he said, quieter now. We can handle this privately. I held his gaze. For a year, I said, you handled it privately. That was my answer. A few days later, the accounts were frozen. He was removed from the business legally, immediately. The investigation moved forward faster than he expected. Turns out, patterns like his don't stay hidden once someone starts looking. Friends stopped calling him. Some sent me messages, others just disappeared from his side entirely. The divorce was straightforward. Clean. On paper. Not for him. As for me, a week later, I went back to the same restaurant. Same table. Same quiet lighting. No audience this time. No performance. Just a finished story. I placed the empty envelope on the table for a moment, then slid it aside. He thought he was replacing me, I said softly. Then I stood up. But all he did was remove himself.
If you found that envelope, would you open it or pretend you never saw it?